Connecting some F1 dots in real time here. I think, Adrian Newey might be headed to McLaren. This is getting very, very techie now. You heard Eddie Jordan leak it yesterday. Some argue that it was much ado about nothing. Some argue that it was a Freudian slip. And I'm trying to put together the F1 dots here in real time. Firstly, we know that those guys, being Adrian Newey and Zach Brown, have been travelling back and forth a lot of late. They travelled together on the same private jet to the Monaco Historic this weekend just past. They travelled home together as well. Adrian Newey is one to enjoy working from England. Never really wanted to work at Maranello even. Eddie Jordan leaked it, saying that when we get to the next contract from Zach Brown or whoever it may be, Freudian slip potentially from Eddie Jordan, the man who apparently manages Adrian Newey. Then we come to find out that Adrian Newey's best man at his last wedding was Mark Webber, who of course is the manager of Oscar Piastri. Tick, tick, tick. It gets more chaotic. I promise you we will get onto Mercedes and drivers press conference imminently. But I'm brainwaving. I'm soundboarding in real time and I feel like we're breaking some news here. Mark Webber, tick, good friends, best man at Adrian Newey's wedding for Pete's sake. Oscar Piastri manager. Oh, the humanity. This gets more techie, doesn't it? Then, of course, you've got Rob Marshall, the fella who works, one of the greatest minds in F1 currently, the fella who works and pulls the strings over at McLaren. He apparently was one of the first people that Adrian Newey hired at Red Bull. And you're looking at it and you're like, likely, less likely. Like why Adrian Newey would move to McLaren versus why he'd move to Ferrari. The McLaren side of this equation is doing one of these, isn't it? Oh, Adrian Newey to McLaren. Chaps, guys and girls. Potentially. But listen, I came on, I wanted to talk about some other things. The drivers' press conference was chaotic, techie, full of suspense. It was everything this driver's press conference at the Imola Grand Prix, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. It was everything that we didn't get from Miami. It was filled with stuff and Easter eggs and chaos, and I want to talk about it. Firstly, Lando Norris was introduced by Tom Clarkson, the F1 interviewer extraordinaire, as Grand Prix winner. Tell us how you've been celebrating. Lando said he's celebrated it properly. And he reflects on the Miami Grand Prix victory thus: I wasn't in first because I was fastest on track. There was luck obviously baked into that circumstance. The safety car absolutely played a part, but nevertheless, for a period there in the latter stages of the Grand Prix during the second stint, Lando says, I was fastest. And that has to mean something, right, going forward into the Imola Grand Prix, a track around which Lando Norris is something of a specialist. This is a tipping point of a Grand Prix for the season that is 2024. Are we going to see competitive racing? Are the likes of McLaren and Mercedes potentially, or potentially not? And Ferrari, do they have the capability to make these upgrades count? Can they catch Red Bull, or are we going to see another 2023 season? This is critical in establishing where the land lies as far as the competitive landscape. And this is the stakes that we talked about, right? This is why I think a lot of diehards and casuals alike will be tuning into the Imola Grand Prix. Can Lando Norris carry on continuing this momentum even? Who knows? That's why we'll be tuning in, right, for quali and the bloody race and free practice to try and understand. It's going to get techie. Lando continues, and this is a bit techie. Tom Clarkson asked the question, where do you think McLaren are, or where do you think, to be precise, because this is important, where do you think McLaren will be after these upgrades? They're bringing loads more upgrades. Everybody's bringing loads more upgrades, aren't they? at the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, because of course we've had 2 sprint race weekends back to back, and you don't bring upgrades to a sprint race weekend because you don't have time sufficient requisite to establish whether your upgrades are bringing more lap time or not. Everyone's bringing upgrades. McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull 2, Mercedes, turn vanes, wings, wing beam, everything. So this is going to be a new one. Lots to suss out here. Tom Clarkson asked Lando Norris the question, where do you think McLaren are in the pecking order after these new upgrades? Expecting to hear either second or first. Lando Norris looked back in Tom Clarkson's face and responded in earnest, saying, we are third. Most notably for the discerning eyes amongst you. Lando did one of these. It was really, it was finite. It was, you had to squint your eyes to see it. But Lando did one of these after he said third. The old disappearing lips. Now, I'm not a body language expert, but what I think that means is that I don't want to say Lando was lying when he said third, but I think he had more to say than that. But because of PR, he wanted to keep his light under a bushel, didn't he? That's techie. One of these is ever so slight. In fact, Tom Clarkson's follow-up question interrupted the old disappearing lips. But check it out. Fact check me on this. Lando Norris, after he says McLaren are third in the pecking order, does one of these. And I think that's telling. I think they could go well, you know. Lando Norris in that papaya-coloured car at Imola, particularly as it's one of his favourite tracks. Then this is where it gets a bit techie as far as the press conference is concerned, because I really enjoyed this. This press conference was everything that the Miami GP drivers press conference wasn't. So first, you still get the dichotomy though. Kevin Magnussen being questioned on penalties, and he's only a couple of points away from a suspension. Do they think that those penalties were warranted? Or in the postmodern day era F1, are stewards being a bit noddy still? So you get that, and these guys don't want to answer the question even. Danny Rick was just a bit like, do I need to answer this question here? Ugh. Danny Rick sat on the fence. K-Mag was like, there's something going on wrong. And again, reminiscent of the Miami GP drivers press conference. But then the legend that is Albert Fabrega of ESPN Latin America pitches the God tier question of the press conference. Here's how the question goes. 2026, we're getting new engines, but they're meant to be quieter, right? Engines have been quiet. They've been trending quieter. Bring back V10 surely. What do you think more engine noise would do for F1? Pitches that to the drivers. Anybody can field it. Danny Rick post the stewards question, picks at the mic, says, you know what? I'll take this one. Yes, Danny Rick. This is what I've been waiting for. A bit of fervour and enthusiasm. But of course, talking about the engines, look, there's a show on called Baby Reindeer. Good example. And this is what I mean. The show on that's captured the zeitgeist called Baby Reindeer. Me and my missus watched the first 10-15 minutes of it yesterday. I was like, I can't watch this. This is rubbish. Didn't hook me. I didn't need to suspend my disbelief. I was like, I can't watch this. My attention dollars are far too, they're worth too much to watch this rubbish show. I've woken up this morning, all of my notifications, Baby Reindeer, watch this video, Baby Reindeer, what's going on with this Baby Reindeer, the real world Baby Reindeer. I'm like, oh my God, I've got to watch this thing, right? It's in the zeitgeist now, it's mainstream, and that was what F1 was in 2-1, right? If you weren't watching, then too many people were talking about it at the water cooler that necessitated you having to watch the next race. This is what F1 is not doing, but this is what this press conference did do. When Danny Rick grabbed the mic and started talking about, I need to remember his words verbatim because they're really important. He says when he first came into F1, it was different as far as the engine noise. He remembers when he got into the car, when they'd start it up, the sound would send tingles through the base of his spine. It was visceral. Those engines sounded like God himself was coming, right? Like it was fear. and it was intimidating. How was I going to tame this bull? And he speaks to this, does Danny Rick, and you can see the smile come on his face to tell he's remembering better days as far as F1's concerned, right? Like, how can you not hear that engine note, whether it's V8 or V10 or V12s even, and smile? Listen, I've been to a couple Red Bull home runs. When you see the F1 cars, the aesthetic standing still is mad. But to see them in the flesh, travelling quickly, and then the noise that accompanies them, if indeed the engines are V10s or V12s, it's a visceral thing that words can't convey it, right? And Danny Rick in this press conference is desperately trying, and you can see like he's beaming as he remembers the emotion and the visceral nature of engines of a bygone era. And he's like, listen, 26 would be a brilliant opportunity to bring that stuff back. It's not the same with the engine, the power units as they currently are. Then Tom Clarkson pitches the question at Carlos Sainz. Initially, he doesn't want to address it, but he's drawn in. This is his specialist subject topic, isn't he? Carlos Sainz remembers that in 2005, when he first saw an F1 car in its natural habitat, that he was scared. When he heard them start up, he was like shocked. The noise was so visceral and so emotive that he could barely believe that a peddler, an F1 jockey, would choose to step into that car and try and tame it. Oh, the humour. Like, how can you not be drawn in when these drivers are talking about F1 and the power units of yesteryear like this in this way? I was just like, this is when F1's incredible, right? Everything that this press conference represented, brilliant questions, brilliant reactions from the driver, reflecting upon F1 of a bygone era, the noise and the emotion and everything that this press conference represented was the antithesis to the nonchalant, laissez-faire answers that we got at the Miami Grand Prix press conference, where the drivers were doing one of these seconded. I agree. Batting back the questions, barely answering them. These questions, courtesy of Albert Fabrega, legend of ESPN Latin America, these questions conjured something out of the drivers. Emotion. Make me feel something. I'm watching Danny Rick and Carlos Sainz responding to these questions, talking about taming those very visceral engines, and I can't help but smile like they are. You see them looking up, thinking, remembering when F1 was proper F1. Mate, go and watch the press conference. It's brilliant. Danny Rick and Carlos Sainz recounting those things. In particular, chaos. Mercedes boys did another press conference. They weren't at the official drivers one, but they did their own one, the two of them. And I think they are in a shambles. I am no body language expert by any means. But when you see Lewis like he's kind of looking down, Lewis answers the first question about the direction and or line of travel of the boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth. Says that we've got a clear direction now. I'm so glad that the guys and girls back at the factory are so industrious that we're all working in the same direction. Meanwhile, while Lewis is giving that answer, take a look at George Russell's body language. He doesn't believe any of the words that are coming out of Lewis Hamilton's mouth. He's hunched over. He's looking down. His eyes are saying something different to the words that he's trying to put together. Speech disfluency, I think they call it. Like, what was going on here? They really don't believe the PR yarn that they're trying to spin us. And then George continues, same sort of thing, clear direction. We're all working towards that. The guys and girls at the factory are nailing it, and we are infinitely grateful to each and every single one of them. I have not seen Lewis Hamilton rub his nose more than I did in that presser. Rubbing your nose, obviously, is a tell that I don't believe anything that he or I are saying at this point. I just feel like they're just PRing it. Of course, they were decent at Miami Grand Prix and they've bought more upgrades. But you guys, for the avoidance of doubt, by now have read the Gary Anderson article that speaks to them simply throwing dartboards at the darts. They're putting the cart before their horse. They do not know what they are doing. And whilst ostensibly at face value, Lewis and George are doing their best to put a brave face on things, any fool, you don't need to be a body language expert to see that these guys do not believe a word that either one of them are saying. Not on your Nelly.